All right. What's going on, guys? We are live here. Welcome to episode number 3 of the Angelo Carlos podcast. We have our guest Francis here, who has been a recruiter for companies like Bill.com, as well as Poshmark and Google. At Bill.com and at Poshmark, he's helped both companies IPO, which is called the initial public offering, where Francis basically helped the company go from a private company to a public company. And now they're listed on the New York Stock Exchange. At Google, Francis worked on the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion for software engineers, as well as several projects there. Welcome to the show, Francis. How are you?
Hey, great, Angelo. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited for today.
Yeah, appreciate you. And for those of you who are curious, Francis is also founder of Isco Studio, a clothing company. We actually have some of his merch here, Isco Studio. For those of you guys who are interested, we'll have a code for 20% off. I believe it's Angelo Carlos 20 for those of you who want to purchase some merchandise from Francis. One of the best companies I've kind of worn a lot, especially as I'm bodybuilding, or especially if I want kind of the casual wear to go out with my friends. I've been wearing a lot of Isco Studios. So thank you, Francis, for being a sponsor of episode number 3.
Of course, Angelo, this is an exciting time for you and an exciting time for Isco. So again, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you. So let's kind of just dive in right now on like recruiting and what you did. So can you tell me about recruiting for those pre-IPO companies, Poshmark as well as Bill.com? What did you do there? And then tell us what it's like working at a startup that eventually becomes a household name that IPOs and becomes a big tech company and lists on the New York Stock Exchange.
Sure, would love to dive into that. So, it's an experience working at, at these pre-IPO startups, right? Because when they start to throw around the term pre-IPO, they start to hint at this, what they call a hockey stick growth, right? So it's this crazy straight up growth, and then an eventual plateau or like a steadying out of the hiring process and of headcount and of, the people you have on teams there. So, kind of to put it in perspective at Bill.com, for example, now Bill on, listed Bill. But basically when I joined, I was employed like 280 something. By the time we IPO'd, we were right around 600. So we had doubled the size of the company, right? And thinking about timeline, I had joined August 2018, and we IPO'd December 2019. So in the span of 16 months, we doubled the size of a company, and that was insane, right? It was so fun to build out processes and take a look at what was scaling and what wasn't scaling, and then really be able to, on the fly, change things up and make like instant impact. I think that was one of my favorite things working in a smaller company, is that if you want something to change, or if you see that there's a bottleneck somewhere, talk about it, do something about it.
For those companies, when they were growing, and you've seen that employee grow from like double the size, right? Was the company raising venture capital funds as you were kind of proceeding through the journey through IPO?
Great question. So yeah, our funding was actually coming from 2 main sources, right? So the product itself was profitable, and like you mentioned there, the second prong was funding rounds, right? So during my time at Bill pre-IPO, I think we had secured 2 more funding rounds. With the latest pre-IPO, being from like Franklin Templeton. So they're a really big household name, and when you start to see names like that and Sequoia Capital, you can really start to kind of build that trust in a startup, because those companies are very, very good at assessing these successful startups that are going to make them some money.
That's very good. Yeah, for those of you who are curious on how venture capital works, essentially a company is trying to grow. What they do is they reach out to venture capitalists or firms who can give them money. Once they get that money, the firm that who raised the money, aka Francis coming on Bill.com, they can start hiring more people. They can start expanding the product. They can do whatever they do to grow more users. And then eventually, as they take more and more money, they kind of start diluting the equity, meaning that in order to get money from those VCs, they got to give them equity. Once they do that, the company starts growing because they're able to reinvest in the product, reinvest in the employees, reinvest, and eventually IPO and become a a company on New York Stock Exchange where their shares are now available to the public, and then they're able basically to hire more people because the company has more money to keep growing and growing and growing. And Francis has done this twice with Bill.com as well as at Poshmark. When Francis mentioned Sequoia Capital as well as Franklin Templeton, they are some of the largest venture capitalists within the Bay Area. Usually companies like Sequoia or Franklin Templeton, they won't invest in your startup unless there is a high likelihood that they're going to be successful. So these VCs, they have been around for such a long time, so they kind of see where they're going to do well. Like a lot of well-known VCs like Sequoia, they've invested in companies like Meta, like Google, whatever it may be, and they kind of have a very proven track record. So it's usually a good thing when VCs like that invest in your company. With regards to the engineering recruiting side of things, Francis, at Bill.com, what were you looking for in an engineer? Were you looking for someone who was coming from a background where they were working in big tech, or someone who came straight from boot camp, straight for undergrad, and just looking to get their feet wet? What kind of engineers were you looking for?
Great question there, Angelo. And I think it was a moving target, right? And that moving target evolved as we evolved as a company, right? So when we were smaller in the 200, it was a referral, right? It could have been, hey, my son wants to intern at Bill.com. So they would come in and they would do an internship over the summer, and then once they graduate, secure a full-time role, right? It was something as easy as that when we were smaller, less established. And then as we started to grow and evolve as a company, those requirements and our search parameters became a little bit more stringent, right? So we started looking for people from the PayPals of the world, the Clovers of the world, really, really good talent from Intuit, from people that had worked on, like, for example, TurboTax.
Yeah.
So as we grew as a company, our needs became a little bit more demanding. So as we got close to and past the IPO point, we really started to hone in on the talent that would thrive and succeed at Bill. Yeah,
that makes sense. That's actually very good to know. It seems like you guys were going kind of like, as you scaled, you had kind of just whomever was getting referred, and then as you kind of got bigger, the requirements got more advanced, of course, right? Where you're looking for people within that fintech background. That's really interesting. Can you give our audience a sense of how compensation works at a pre-IPO company, right? I know you've kind of worked at Google where you have that post-IPO. We'll get to that a little bit later. But how does it work for pre-IPO when the equity, the shares are not on the New York Stock Exchange or any exchange in general?
Ooh, that excites me, right? I want it to be a career pre-IPO hunter, right? And I've wanted to just get into one more pre-IPO and maybe call it a day. Right?
You got a big bank, right?
Exactly. So for those of you that are thinking about exploring the pre-IPO space, it is a very exciting time. But the way that compensation works at a pre-IPO in terms of base and equity, let's say, for example, you're a software engineer coming in at 100, let's say 130 to 150 base, which is pretty normal. Yeah, it's great for industry standard. I believe we were starting off our entry level Swedes at around like 110K in the Bay Area.
Wow, that's really good.
It was really good, right? And it's this is like a job fresh out of college. Maybe you interned somewhere and got $110,000 a year in base salary. In addition to that, you would also get a sizable amount of equity, right? And when you look at pre-IPO equity, let's say, and this is just throwing out a rough number there, right? But let's say you came in at $110,000 base. You would also receive, let's say, 10,000 shares that vested over the course of 4 years.
Oh, wow.
So, that's, if you think about it, that's $2,500 a year for the next 4 years. But how some companies do, pre-IPO equity is from day 1 of employment to day 364 of employment, you get 0 shares. On day 365, you pass what's called the 1-year cliff, and you're granted 25%, or in this case, 2,500 shares all at once. And then from there, some companies break it up to where, you still get that same 2,500 shares a year, but it can be broken up monthly, quarterly, depending on how that company's configured their, essentially their stocks. So really, really good to keep that in mind. But one thing really important to remember is that you will get higher shares at a lower price if you join a more risky pre-IPO, right? If you join a more risky startup and, let's say they're at Series A or Series B funding, they'll dump maybe 10,000 or like 50,000 shares, right? And with 50,000 shares, you're getting them for, at your price, maybe 50, 60 cents, right? So that's something really important to consider versus if you join a company later when they're more established, maybe they're Series E, Series F funding, you might get shares at $20 a share, right? And, and at that point, it becomes a little less lucrative, but still lucrative nonetheless, right? Because if they IPO and they're trading at $300, then, I mean, you've like 15x your $20 investment versus a company that, let's say you get your shares at 30 a share and then they start trading at 25, you instantly took a loss for all that work. So, it does, there is a risk and reward to kind of, balance and weigh out as you're going through your search. But just keep in mind, there is not just one pre-IPO. There are a ton of companies that want to go public. There are a ton of companies in this growth stage. But yeah, that is kind of my intro to pre-IPO shares.
Yeah, no, that's great. So Francis kind of mentioned a lot of great stuff there where companies will have a Series A, B, C, D, E, eventually onto the IPO. If you join Series A or even pre-seed or angel investing round, it's a lot more riskier to join the company. But if you do see the whole vision through and you do go through IPO, you will cash out. You will make a lot more money through the initial public offering. Similar to if you join like a Series D, Series E, there's a high chance you're going to IPO. So say like you join a Stripe, kind of like later stage where they're about to IPO soon, right? Something like that. You will not make as much money, but it's a lot safer. So it just depends where you are in your career and the amount of risk you can take. We always recommend if you're young in your career and you feel like there's a great mission, there's a founder that you kind of enjoy or want to be around and you can learn from them, go to that risky company, try an IPO, or even just learn as much as you can because worst comes to worst, you go back home with your family, you learned a lot and you figure everything out again. So that's one thing there. And Francis, I was wondering, so with regards to people selecting their company to work at, right, a startup, can you go over how important it is to pick a founder that you believe in or maybe join a startup with a founding team that has previous success? Because startups are very risky and we know that especially there are a lot of startups in Silicon Valley that kind of grow, some that fail, but go over how important it is to join a cause or a founder that you believe in.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%, right? Interviews go both ways, right? So as you're interviewing or as they're interviewing you, you're also interviewing them, whether that's the founder, the CEO, head of engineering at these smaller organization. Definitely get to know them, right? If this is their first shot at anything, right? Maybe they were a team lead at Meta or at a FANG company, and they wanted to take the plunge and the risk themselves to dive into this, they might be in over their heads, as maybe their second or third technical hire, right? So it really does come down to you assessing the entire situation. But the great thing is, when you're talking to these small companies, there are chances for you to interact directly with the CEO. There was one company that I was interviewing with early pandemic, after all those layoffs. And the CEO was really interesting, right? Was a very, very interesting, very technically gifted person, but had a little bit of a hard time putting words down and communicating words, right? So when I look for a CEO, I look for somebody that can really sell the product. I'm not looking for necessarily a very technically gifted person. If they are, that's amazing. But I'm looking for somebody with a great polish that can take this company into Series B, C, D, however many rounds of funding, be able to sell the product to investors. And then when you prep for IPO, be able to really stand up there on the podium and sell this company to the world.
No, I agree. A lot of times founders, right, are super technically gifted and VC firms like Andreessen Horowitz, they love it when the founder is technical in itself, right? But also, I think we need to keep in mind too that this is a business and companies need a lot of user growth, need to generate revenue. They need to kind of push the needle forward on the business side of things for their companies to be successful, because there are a lot of amazing companies where you have these Harvard, Stanford, Cal grads, MIT grads who are building this great technology, but a lot of times too, the business side does have to fall into play. Thank you so much for talking about Bill.com. I kind of want to jump in now to Poshmark. You joined Bill pretty early, during the early series round, and then I know Poshmark you joined a lot later. Do you remember what round that was they joined? And then kind of what was it like joining much later into a startup as it's kind of progressed all the way through those rounds?
Yeah, another great question there, Angelo. So, excuse me, choking on my words here.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
But yeah, when I look at my time at Poshmark, and like you mentioned there, thanks for calling that out, I joined a lot later stage, right? So I had joined, what was that, like November? And then I think 2 or 3 months later, we IPO'd.
Oh, wow. That's so fast.
Yeah, I was at the very tail end of the prep work. So, there was a lot more established, there were already email comms going out about, hey, let's not talk about anything. Let's not talk about our valuation. Here's our S1 filing. And these were coming in as I joined the company. So I didn't get to do as much of the mega hyper growth impact there. And a lot more was established, right? They already had SOPs. They had, kind of the culture built out. They had their internal transfer processes figured out. They had scaled the company. They had done everything that they needed to. They were just essentially looking for a recruiter to help with the tail end and then also maintenance after. Yeah,
that's fascinating. With regards to recruiting, since you're already kind of like in those later stages, were you recruiting? Were you guys much more picky, like looking to recruit from big tech, or were you kind of still looking for just anyone who you would feel like fit the build?
great question. So that was it was one of those things that we really had to sit down and take a look at, right? Because there were some orgs that were we call them grassroots. Right. So they, like, for example, their customer support team, a lot of the folks were coming from retail and then stepping in and then growing from entry-level support agent up to, a lot of the directors had their only job before this was coming from retail.
Oh, wow.
Right. So that was a very interesting dynamic to step into. Even the head of their support team was employee number 1 and was just a person answering emails. And then they had grown to, head of CS. So,
wow.
Stepping into like coming into an organization like that where, and supporting that team was really interesting. But it took a lot of essentially like a thought process changing, right? It's like, hey, if we have, let's say $27 an hour to offer somebody fresh out of college with no experience or, a seasoned chat support rep for the same exact amount of money, why would we not get the seasoned rep, right? And kind of balance that out with the junior team from retail and bring in some, some industry knowledge, right? So that was something that I and me and my team really advocated for to help grow the organization that way and bring in really professionals in their field.
Exactly. Well, that's so fascinating. I appreciate you kind of going over that. And then I want to ask one last question about the whole Build.com and Poshmark phase of startups and during your recruiting time. What is a work-life balance at a startup? Do you kind of remember how it was? How much time were you working? And then like how much time were like the engineers or any other like business people how much time were they working?
I always joke around about this, but Angelo, I used to have a lot more hair. My hairline.
You look great,
I
man.
have 5 head.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah, it's going to be a great comparison to the Google days, right? When we talk about, pre-IPO startups, because you are on a lean team, a lean, well-performing team, very lean, but you are in charge of so much, right? For example, at Bill, I was the only recruiter for the entire customer success organization, same at Poshmark, and then I dove into the technical roles as well. So there was a lot that you juggle from, and your calls would go from, "Hi, how's it going?" Entry level support, kind of speech there, and then switching it up to a VP of user experience, right? Going into the UX UI world, And then it could be an entry level suite after that call, right? So you were all over the place.
Everywhere, yeah.
And yeah, the work life balance was it takes a lot. It takes a toll on you. And looking outside of even just myself and my team, Bill.com, we used to have it was a bi-weekly happy hour every other Friday. Right. And it was hosted by HR. So we would put it together. We'd order food, get some drinks. And then essentially what we were doing is that we were pairing that with our software engineers' product release. Right.
Oh,
So
wow.
every 2 weeks, they were pushing a release out.
Yeah.
Right. And that was crazy because they would be at their desks until, because they released at midnight on Friday. So technically, going into Saturday morning, they would be at their desks, slaving away, coding, getting everything ready for the next release. And I thought it was crazy because the non-engineers in the company like myself, we were having fun, right? We were we were standing around having beers on tap, playing board games, and our engineers were there just coding. We would be like, hey, let's go take a quick break, and they're like, oh, let me just finish this really quick.
Yeah.
And they never finished, right? So there was this and then obviously they'd come in, maybe grab a beer, bring it to their desk so they can have some fun while they're coding, grab some chicken wings and eat that and get their keyboards all messy. But yeah, that was an experience for sure. But yeah, in terms of work-life balance, it does take a little bit more, but you learn so much more in the process. You become very well-rounded. You learn how to work really well under pressure. So when you go to your FANG companies, it's nothing new, and you really actually get to hone in on a specific craft.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. So that is fascinating. If you guys caught it there, Francis said, like every 2 weeks they're pushing code into production, and that's extremely fast, especially within tech, right? Because you have a lot of reviews, approvals. Once you see the difference, as Francis is probably going to talk about big tech, there's a lot more kind of rules, regulations. You have to go through a lot more approvals before actually putting something into production. So let's jump into the time at big tech at Google. Can you talk about the roles you recruited at Google? And kind of what was that like? And then talk about the levels too that these roles are for.
Yep, I would love to hear, Angelo. And like I just mentioned there, honing in on your craft, right? I think that was my key takeaway from my time at Google. There was honing in on craft, right? And like I had kind of alluded to earlier, I could go from a software engineering call to an entry level rep call to a VP call at Google.
Crazy.
It blew my mind because you would switch up and the call would change pace, right? When you get to those VP levels, they're very very process driven, very like how can I make an impact, whereas the some of the more entry level folks are doing a little bit more to sell themselves versus talking about historical impact that they've already made and what they can do to help your org. So transitioning that now to Google, I recruited mid to senior level SWEs. Right. Wow. So software engineers that were level 4 to level 5.
Okay.
It is a very, very niche window, right, of profiles that I'm looking at day in and day out. And I think that was the biggest transition, right, is I'm only focusing on people with, let's say, 3 to 7 years of experience in software engineering, right? Every now and then I'd get an exciting front end role that did Java, JavaScript, TypeScript. But the bulk majority of the hiring we did was for back-end generalists, right? Wow, so looking at Java, Python, right? So there was very little variation in what we did. We would just do it over and over and over again until you really refined your craft and when I took a look up at my desk, I realized I was working alongside top talent. And they make you top talent because you do one thing and you do it really well all the time.
That's fascinating. Yeah. That's fascinating. With regards to the L4, L5 roles, what kind of talent were you recruiting? Were they all coming from big tech? Were you poaching, or were you just kind of looking for people who were coming from other like smaller startups?
Yeah, great question. So when I first started, we were mainly, a lot of the candidates that were coming our way. And to kind of give you to explain this, I'll tell you a quick little step back about Google recruiting. So I was a recruiter there at Google. We also had a full-on sourcing team.
Oh, and
So we had sourcers. Yeah, these sourcers drove pipelines. So they would reach out to candidates, do a quick initial call, make sure that baseline is good, make sure that location is good, compensation is within the range, and then they would forward them over to the recruiting team. Recruiting would double check everything, gather a little bit more, specifics on what they've accomplished in their career, because us as recruiters, we own what's called requisitions, aka the company's openings. So when I see candidate C here that has, C++, some Python, I'm like, oh, hey, this person can be a really good, low level, almost firmware engineer. Perfect. I have a firmware engineer opening in Seattle where this candidate is working right now for Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
So you draw and you make those connections in your head. But essentially, what we do is we work with a sourcing team. They push candidates our way. We, have them go through the interview process. We prep them for the interview process, and then hopefully make it to offer. But to answer your question, Angelo, we were sourcing pretty heavily from Amazon.
Oh, wow.
Amazon, let's say, because for example, their compensation
Mm-hmm.
was right along ours, maybe a little bit less. Same with Microsoft. The hard part with Microsoft was, a lot of people were working C#.net. So that was interesting. But yeah, it's kind of more old school. But just thinking about that process, though, it was really interesting, right? To source from big tech, and then when we tried sourcing from from smaller companies, sometimes you would find a rock star, right? But just like a lot of the kind of the prep that comes with already coming in from a big company, they've already interviewed through a similar interview process at Amazon or at Meta, right? So they've gone through a very similar grading scale, I could call it, and then have done so successfully. So I had a little bit more confidence, at least initially, that those candidates could make it through a very similar hiring process.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we're talking about hiring now. Can we talk about compensation? You kind of mentioned that briefly, right? So you're recruiting for L4, L5. What is compensation like at Google? What have you seen as like the highest? What's the lowest? And then can you go over what it's like recruiting for different regions, right? And when I say regions, I know the Bay Area, New York, Seattle. Those are premium plus regions, and then places like say Raleigh, North Carolina, Texas. There are different types of compensation. Can you go over that?
Sure. So my key takeaway from actually Google's regional compensation, right, is Bay Area, New York, really high cost of living areas. Those were considered premium plus. And like you mentioned there, Angelo, looking at Austin, Texas, looking at North Carolina or the other smaller offices. Google owns a lot of real estate, by the way. So looking at the smaller offices, even SoCal, right? I know you're no stranger to the SoCal office, but it's roughly, I want to say, a 20% reduction in overall compensation, which, to some, it makes sense, right? If you take a 20% pay cut and you move to North Carolina, you can make 20% of $300,000, that's about $60K. $240,000 is a lot out in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Yeah, a lot of property out there.
Right, you can buy an entire. You could probably buy half the state.
You get like good amount. Yeah, you could buy last time.
Yeah, you'll get it. Exactly. That $240K will last you, your loved ones, your family a long time. But $240K or a $60K difference to go from the Bay Area to LA, from what I've seen, it's a pretty similar cost of living.
Very expensive.
Yeah, I mean, it's super expensive as you're seeing yourself down there. But yeah, it becomes a little less worth it, right?
Yeah.
Kind of considering your location, the compensation. Do you want to relocate for work? Do you want to stay where you are and take a 20% pay cut? So these are things that you talk about. A lot of candidates would talk it out with their family. If they were more junior, talk it out with their parents.
Yeah.
Talk it out with their friends, and to see what's going on there. But yeah, in terms of sorry, go for it.
No, that was great. With that, and I kind of agree with you that the whole LA thing, right? if you're moving from the Bay Area to Los Angeles, 20% is a huge cut, and it's actually very expensive in Los Angeles, or even Southern California, like even in the San Diego area. So it's almost just as expensive as the Bay Area, if not the same, right? So it's kind of weird area there, and I think they should bump up the compensation, to be quite frank, for those living in Southern California. So that's kind of what I feel there. Yeah. I want to go over competing offers and negotiation. We spoke with AC last time, and he was also a recruiter at Google. He gave us great advice on how negotiation works. Can you give the audience a viewpoint on how negotiation usually works at big tech? Because you already went over it with small tech, right? Now that your equity is already completely vested because it is a public company, how does compensation work, and how does negotiation work?
That's a great question, right? So, and to be able to answer this question, I'm going to go ahead and give you a comp scenario.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. Actually, that's great for the viewers to help a lot.
Let's run it. So, taking a look, right, Angelo, let's pretend you are a level 4 software engineer that I'm hiring for Mountain View here in the Bay Area.
Mountain View. Okay. And that's
right?
Headquarters of Google, right?
Yes, that is where Google is headquartered. But with that, level 4 base offer, $290,000 total compensation.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And compensation at Google is a little bit tricky, right? So let's say with a $290K offer, you get $180K base, and then $110K, or let's say maybe $92K in equity,
mm-hmm.
and then the last $18K in bonus,
mm-hmm.
or perceived potential bonus, totaling up for a grand total of $290K.
Yeah,
that is where we had started. That was the auto-approved offer and the highest we can get without having to go through our compensation team. So Google's our hiring platform, we actually had a very, very it was a very well-engineered calculator that we could use for offers, and anything under 290K wouldn't flag for approval.
Wow.
So I can get you an offer today for 290K. If that's good with you, we'll go ahead and sign. But there are two things you can do to actually raise past the 290K. Number one is, and Angelo, you're no stranger to this one, but providing higher than offered expectations, right? So if you say, hey, I really appreciate this 290K offer, I was aiming for 400K though. Some people shoot for really, really high numbers, knowing that we'll be somewhere in the middle, right? So, a lot of people would shoot for that 375, 400K. At that point, me as the recruiter, I'd say, that's a little bit out of our budget. It's going to be very hard, or if not impossible, to get that approved to maintain internal equity, to make sure that things are fair for your current employees and current coworkers that you're joining at Google. From there, I would flag that to our compensation team, and they would get back to me saying, "Hey, Francis, their comp request of 400K is way above market. Try offering 310, or let's say 310, and see how that lands." And then I'll go ahead and extend the 310 offer. All the numbers update in the system, so it's very easy for me to just pass the numbers along to you as the candidate. But I'll go ahead and extend the 310K offer. If you bite, then we sign. If you push back and say, oh, you know what, I didn't realize 400K was way out of range, is there any way we can push for 320? I, as the recruiter, will go back to compensation again and say, hey, you know what, Angelo is really, really interested in signing, but we'll sign at 320K. He pinky promised. More often than not, compensation will budge and give me that 320K. Or if they don't budge and they meet me at 315, what they can do is they can move some of the numbers around. But one thing that was non-negotiable at Google was base pay. If you're an L4 coming in at 180K, trust me, that number is unnegotiable. You will stay 180K until your performance eval, until you go through things that can increase as performance warrants as you're here. But base is the one number that will not change. Sign-on can change, Equity can change because those are fluid numbers. So let's say compensation says, hey, Francis, go ahead and extend an offer for 320K year one, 310 year two. And then, so essentially that averages out to what, 315 over years 1 and 2. So we bumped the number up 25K, if I'm doing the math right. And, that's not a number to look away from. That's a good amount of money, right? We made a 25K dent a year for you.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. It's kind of important to keep in mind what Francis was saying with the whole base thing. If you have a family and you feel that base is extremely important to you, negotiate for more base, but just know that there is a certain band that you need to hit or reach, and that kind of can't get moved, right? When it comes to equity is the most negotiable part of the deal, in the sense that the company can give you more stock for your total compensation. Companies like Google, you need to remember that they're front loaded. So a majority of your equity will comes in year 1 and 2, 33, I believe, right? So 33% years 1 and 2. So if you feel that you're only going to stay at Google for 1 or 2 years, try and ask for a lot of equity. And then when it comes to sign-on bonus is usually negotiable as well. For me, I had sign-on bonus, but I wanted to have more equity, so we removed some of the sign-on bonus to put up to more equity, and they're able to give more compensation. When it comes to your year-end bonus, that year-end bonus is usually there's usually a band, right? So you usually get like 10, 15% depending on your level, and then depending on how performance reviews goes, what we call perf at Google, they'll be able to multiply that certain bonus at year end, right? So if you do really well, they'll multiply your bonus by 1.6, so about 60%. If you do pretty bad, they keep it at 1. If you do super bad, they want to fire you, they multiply it by 0.9, so you lose 10%. So keep in mind that there are 3 types of kind of offers or negotiation strategies that you can: base, equity, or bonus. So those are your 3 levers you can pull. And then can you go over one last thing, Francis, with negotiation? How does competing offers work, and how can a software engineer who has an offer from, say, like Meta, Databricks, and like Amazon, how can they help use that to leverage a higher offer for the company that they're applying to, or for Google when they get the offer from Google?
This is amazing. Angelo, thanks for opening this door. I recommend everybody to be that is interviewing at Google or Meta or Amazon to go also interview elsewhere. Get as much experience first off in interviewing as you can with data structures and algorithms, with just the flow of the interviews, with the team matching process. Go through the entire thing so that when it comes time for you to put on a show, you're ready, right? And that show comes in the form of an interview. But another great thing about interviewing, not only for the prep, but also for the competing offer, like you mentioned there, right? So competing offers are vital to securing high-paid Google. Let's say, for example, you're interviewing at 2 companies. One is Meta, one is Google, right? Same level. You're interviewing for an L4 equivalent. Meta is probably going to come at you with a very high offer. At least, that's how it was, about a year ago, right? Meta was coming out with some very outrageous numbers. Those numbers were through the roof, right? Like an L4, they were paying in the 400s.
Wow. For an engineer?
Yep.
That's insane.
It blew my mind. I was like, okay, you're paying an L4, L5 pay.
That's
right?
Crazy.
Yeah, it was insane to see that. And because of that, we got into essentially a bidding war, right? And that's what offer letters do, is they create almost a bidding war scenario between 2, 3, multiple employers. So in this case, between a Google offer and a Meta offer, let's say your offer at Meta comes in at 400. Google's offer is going to come in at, let's say, approval without, just by expectations, 310. What Google is going to try to do is we're going to try to hit that number or find a sweet spot for you, while the compensation team also takes a look at your current team, the team that you're interviewing for, and make sure that you're not getting paid $100K more than somebody that's been there for 2 years, right? That's also an L4. So it's what they call internal equity, making sure that there's fairness throughout the entire process, and we're not just hiring people and getting into a bidding war, right? So realistically, let's say your 310 offer at Google got bumped up to 350 to compete with Meta's 400. We're still not apples to apples, right? We're not at 400K each, unfortunately. But some of the things you can think about and, or the team that you're working on, the scale that you're going to be working on, the longevity of the role, the work-life balance, which I will say is better at Google
I think
than at Meta. Yeah, right. I think Angelo, you can speak for that firsthand there, but yeah. So those are things. Those are other factors to bring into when you're negotiating compensation. Is please come with a FANG offer if you can. If you have the capability to come with a FANG offer, come with a FANG offer. And worst comes to worst, if the Google number just does not meet expectations, take the other one. You can always come back.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Prince says come with a FANG offer. Think of it. If you pass the Google interview, right, which is probably one of the harder ones in the industry, right, you can pass the Meta one. You can pass the Apple one. You can pass the Netflix one, right? So just keep that in mind. It's like you're so capable of achieving anything you want in this world. At the end of the day, just apply, interview. Francis said in the beginning, as you interview more, the better you get. So when you have that chance to interview at Google, when you have that chance to interview at Meta, you'll do well because you've been through the trials and tribulations. So I completely agree with you there. A lot of our guests or a lot of our viewers, they want to get into big tech. And a lot of the roles you're seeing, you'll probably see 3,000, 1,000 people applying for that same job, right? What can our viewers do to make sure that they get their resume viewed by the recruiter? Because AC was letting us know after, say, 1,000 or 2,000 people applied to that one role, they start just getting, recruiters may get tired looking at all these applications. So what can people do to make sure they actually get viewed and have a chance to interview?
Great question. One thing that I recommend in any industry, right, or big tech, small tech, anything, is take a look at the job description that you're applying to, right? And I know this takes a few minutes of your time, maybe 2 to 5 minutes, but find one thing in that job description that you think you can do and do really well, right? So let's say the verbiage is a little bit off, right? Take that verbiage, the verbiage in your resume is a little bit off. Take the verbiage in your resume and update it to the job description resume or job description, posting so that it's included in your resume so that when a recruiter who is non-technical reads over your list of accomplishments, your bullet points, we see that there is something that aligns to the job description that we're hiring for. So something very, very, very important. So if you have a transferable skill, highlight it in the way that the job description highlights it in the requirements and the qualifications, whatever you have there. But that is a surefire way to get your resume viewed.
That's awesome. That's great advice. With regards to kind of demystifying the applicant tracking system, when someone submits a resume, does it have to get screened by like an applicant tracking system, then it gets approved through Greenhouse, and then the recruiter sees it? How does it work?
Yeah, great question. And I know there's this fear, right? That that applicant tracking systems are a candidate's worst nightmare. They're not, right? Applicant tracking systems, and I've used every name brand applicant tracking system you can think of. I've used some really weird one-off ones that are very cheap. I've used the most expensive ones. I've used the in-house built Google stuff. Like, essentially, there's always a human being reviewing your resume. So keep that in mind. There's nothing built to go ahead and say, hey, this resume doesn't qualify. There's no keywords here. So, there was these recommendations years ago about like putting a bunch of keywords at the bottom of your resume, right? And then, making them the color of the page. So like turning your text white. So it populates in an ATS. There's no ATS like that. The recruiter reads through job title, job position, job duties, job responsibilities, and then from there, decides whether or not to move forward. So there is a very, very strong human process in hiring, which is great because I would not want to hand that off. Number one, for my own job security, and number two, for everybody's safety.
No, that's awesome. It's good to know that. Thanks for demystifying it. We have a lot of people applying to jobs, internships, whatever maybe, who are watching the channel, and they're just kind of confused. Like, I've applied to 50 jobs, no one's replied back to me. I haven't got an interview yet. but there is a humanistic aspect of this. So that's good to know. Excuse me.
Bless your soul.
Thank you. Yeah, a little sneezing going on there with that. So thank you, Fran. This is like some great advice, especially for those who are trying to get into big tech, to those who are applying. We're going to get into kind of the fun part of the podcast now. We're about 45 minutes in, so we got some fun questions, and then I got to ask the last question for you to help give back to the world. So the first question is, we like to do a top 5 draft. I'm a huge fan of Podcast P. For those of you who Podcast Ps, that's Paul George. For you, I know you're a huge car guy, so we're going to go with a draft. So we're going to start with the top 5 draft. Top 5 car brands. Since you are our guest of honor, we'd love for you to go first. Who is the first pick of the car draft? Who are you drafting, Francis?
Great question. And I was actually just having this talk the other day. But for me, I'm a huge Porsche fanatic. Those who follow me on Instagram, on our YouTube channel, know that I love Porsches. I have a couple of them, and they are the best cars in the world to drive. In terms of reliability, in terms of practicality, in terms of the connectedness to the road, driver feel, everything. It comes with a Porsche, right? You can put 30,000 miles on a Porsche, you're barely breaking it in. Mm-hmm. You put 30,000 miles on a Ferrari or Lamborghini, it's a high mileage that nobody's going to want to buy. So keep that in mind, right? I mean, you can drive these cars. There's a joke that they say that Porsches are the only cars you can drive to the track, do a ton of laps, beat up on the track, and then drive it home after. Everybody else is trailering in their McLarens, trailering in their Ferraris, their Lambos to do these exotic driving events. But Porsches, you just drive them to the track and just abuse them, and then they'll start up just fine, and you'll go home. So there's
That's awesome.
Number 1 is Porsche.
Yeah, that's awesome. And when you're in SoCal, we should definitely go to the Porsche Driver Experience Studio. It's kind of near LA, so that's something I've always wanted to do with you. So we'll get that planned when you make your visit. It'll be something fun for us to do. We can feel some great content. And ISCO actually was inspired by Porsche, right?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for bringing that up, Angelo. I love these cars so much that I started an entire clothing brand around Porsches, around the community, around the experience. So Angelo's shirt that he showed earlier, along with this shirt that I'm wearing today.
Oh, that is great.
See that?
Yeah, we can see it. We can see it. We got this too here from Most Hated.
Most Hated right there.
Thank you so much, the show Angelo. Today.
Appreciate you. But yeah, it is literally a lifestyle for me. I'm always going to events. I am deep into the Porsche community. I joined Porsche Club of America. Mm-hmm. And there's different regions. I just joined the most active, one of the oldest regions in the U.S., which is our Golden Gate region. So considering a chunk of the Bay Area. But yeah, that is my love for Porsche, and that outwardly and openly coming out in this podcast.
That's awesome. And Francis is a big in the car community, especially in the Bay Area. And ISCO is growing as well pretty fast on YouTube as well as on Instagram, and they got their store up as well. So I'll leave the links below for Francis's his business. Also, we have a code Angelo Carlos 20 for 20% off your order at ISCO. I own a lot of ISCO stuff, so I'm a huge fan of the collection. So let's jump back into the draft. For me, I'm a Bay Area guy. I have been a fan of this, as you guys can probably see like on my Instagram, and that's Tesla. I'm going to go with Tesla. Elon, I'm a big fan of the self-driving movement. It's kind of buggy, 100%. It's super scary sometimes, but I just love driving the car, and it got me on EVs, so I'm going to go with Tesla for mine. So what about you, Francis? Who are you picking with number 2?
I love electric cars. I love the EV movement, but I think for me personally, I'm just not ready to make the change yet. So I'm going to go with another very, very fun poor gas mileage brand, and I'm going to go with Lamborghini.
Lambo, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, crazy to say, but I feel like Lamborghini just there's a different community that Lamborghini appeals to. I love the sound. I love the You know, I guess now you could say they're liability. They're owned by Volkswagens,
Oh yeah.
Porsche. Yep. So, you know, there's some Volkswagen parts in there. You know, you'll see a lot of crossover between Lamborghini and Audi, for example. You find a lot of Audi part numbers when you look at Audi logos, even when you look at like, you know, some of the small things in there, some of the sensors, the side markers, they're all like common parts. So Lamborghini, in terms of reliability, in terms of sound, in terms of driver experience, I'd go with them as my second. But what about you?
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, Lambo's great. And then are you like Lamborghini Aventador? Is that your car that you like most for Lambo, or are you more of an Urus guy?
Funny thing, I mean, I like the new reliable Lambos. I like when Volkswagen took over.
Hmm.
And funny thing, the Urus is actually their number one selling automobile now. So
Oh
Lamborghini has
wow.
gone from a supercar company to an SUV company, just like
Yeah.
Porsche. Porsche sells more Cayennes and Macans than 911s, Boxsters, and Caymans. So when you think about it, these are technically SUV companies with a production of fun, fast cars.
That is so cool. Yeah, I've seen so many Uruses now. I don't know if it's because they are so heavy that people are able to ride off the Urus, but it's also a really nice car that I've been
Right.
seeing around. Yeah, especially when people wrap it matte black. I think it's one of the cooler colors.
It looks so nice, and then leave some gloss black accents.
Yeah, so ooh, that's
Yeah,
nice, man. Maybe one day we'll get there.
I appreciate you asking, Angelo. What would you say for your second pick?
So I'm actually I grew up a huge Lexus fan. So I have come from the Filipino background, and for some reason my parents just love Lexuses. So I'm gonna have to draft Lexus, and my family they had like the I think the RC, the IS. So they lasted forever, which is crazy. Like we got them like brand new. And my dad like used all his money, and my parents because like we just wanted a car. We're big car people, so and they lasted us so long. So I gotta go with Lexus. Yeah. What about you? Who are you going with your third pick?
You know, that's a great second pick, by the way, Angelo. Lexus is the perfect mix of reliability and luxury. Because my third pick is going to be luxury, but not reliability. It's going to be Mercedes.
Ooh, yeah, you have a lot of Mercedes. I think y'all your family's got the G Wagon, and you lowered your other E-Class, right?
Yeah, yeah. That was actually the car that started my love for cars.
Uh,
Was the Mercedes that I brought to college. At that point, it was what, like 15 years old or something. But I ended up lowering it and then lowering it more and then lowering it more. And then we broke it down in LA. And then I ended up going on some adjustable air suspension so I can raise and lower it when I wanted. And that became ultimately just a show car because it was so impractical. To make the car go up and down, I needed an entire setup in the trunk with air compressors and air tank. And it became literally just for show because I couldn't use it for moving stuff anymore or putting stuff in the trunk. So that was a learning lesson for me. But yeah, what's your third, Angelo?
yeah, that's a great question. So my third is Honda. I used to have a Honda. It was a coupe. It had a red interior. The car was so reliable. The only time it ever broke down was when the starter gave out, and I had to replace it. And I was so broke at the time that I used all my money to replace the starter. And then I think eventually, like a year or two ago, we're driving home and we're on the Bay Bridge and someone hit it. So eventually got totaled. But that car was amazing and it worked on the cheapest gas, especially gas so crazy expensive right now. So that was a great car. What about you, France? Who are you going with your fourth pick?
My fourth, I'm gonna say, is my second commuter brand, BMW.
Oh, I was
And
get
I, yeah,
that one.
yeah. Feel free to snatch it after me, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Great cars. Fun story as a pandemic project. I had bought a really, really old. It was like a '93 3 Series BMW.
Mm-hmm.
It was bone stock. It was a little beat, but it was essentially an homage to my dad's first car in the U.S. Well, my dad's first new car. When he came here, he bought a brand new BMW 318.
Oh, wow, I didn't
And
know that.
yeah, it was his baby, right? It was a bright red, same exact color as the BMW I built. And that was his baby. He would wash it every week. That thing was in pristine condition. We weren't allowed to eat in there. It was really babied and well maintained. So, out of respect for that, I built the next model in the same color. And really went all out with that build. Ultimately sold it to my cousin, but it was a great car, very reliable, surprisingly. But I consider Mercedes and BMW commuter cars, right? Because they make fun, dailyable cars that aren't gonna, like knock your dentures out if you're old when you're driving it to work.
Yeah,
So there's that.
agree. Yeah, they're great
What
cars
about
to
you?
drive, and it's good that they have like sentimental value with you and your dad. That's pretty cool. Fun fact: Francis actually helped me buy my first BMW. I bought a BMW i8. It's where the doors go up from like that Post Malone song, "Cruising in my i8, skirt skirt." And then we bought it. I was pretty excited. Then took it to the shop. Found out I was involved in a major accident, so ended up returning it. Good thing that the place had like I think a 5-day return policy, which kind of sucked because I really liked the car, but c'est la vie. For me, my fourth pick will be Ferrari, Ferrari 458. I just love the look of Ferraris. I don't know if I'll ever buy one day, but I just love the look of it. I always wanted to drive it, and there are times I go to there's like a Ferrari in Southern California that I just look at the cars. They're so beautiful. When it comes to expensive cars like that, I'd be too scared to drive it. But just love looking at the Ferraris. If I ever was to get one, it would be like a red one. I saw some like kind of like a little bit more affordable ones, or the Ferrari Californias, which are top down. But just the 458s, the Italias, those are super nice. So Ferrari. What about you, France? Last and final pick for the draft. Who are you taking?
Funny thing, I was thinking Ferrari earlier at the bottom of the list, but then after you'd mentioned it, I thought about how Ferrari doesn't allow their customers to modify the cars.
Oh wow!
Right. So it was crazy. I think it was there was a DJ. I think it was I'm gonna butcher the name. Was it Deadmau5?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So they had done some like crazy rap on it. But yeah, Ferrari sends out cease and desist letters.
No way.
To customers. Yeah, you cannot modify your Ferrari outside of their liking. So, if it goes against their branding, if it goes against anything else, they will send you a cease and desist. There's one owner of Houston's Hot Chicken out in Las Vegas. Really, really cool guy, but Ferrari sent him a cease and desist because he bought a classic Ferrari and wrapped it in purple. They didn't like it.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's my one thing against Ferrari. But to wrap up the tail end of this, I'm going to go with a company that will love for you to modify their cars, and it's McLaren.
Oh, that's a great one, man.
Yeah. McLaren will sell any car to you if you have the money. It's not like Ferrari where you have to establish a relationship with a dealer. And to establish a relation with a dealer, you have to buy a used Ferrari from a used lot and then, start to show that, hey, I can own a Ferrari. Let me buy my first new one. So you have to own a used Ferrari before you can own a new one.
Oh,
but with McLaren, yeah, right? Isn't that crazy? Ferrari has so many hoops you have to jump through just to own one.
Wow,
Yeah,
that is crazy. That is a lot of hoops. Yeah, I never knew that. Well, I've never inquired about you, Ferrari. So I never knew that. But I've always looked at the used ones like on Carfax. I didn't know. So I guess you have a used one, and then you gotta get a new one. Oh, who knew? That's cool. Good advice to. We'll clip this, man. Oh, for Ferrari and Porsche lovers who want all this great information you're providing.
Yeah, for all the future software engineers that get the money for Ferraris.
Yeah.
Just know you have to buy a used one first before you buy a new one.
I've seen that, man. I've seen that at the Google office. A lot of 911s at the Google office. I've seen an i8. I've seen a McLaren. And then all the 911s are the Carreras that I see at the Google office. They were the Miami, what's it called? South Beach blue color. That color is so nice.
Yes. Dude, I'm a huge fan of Miami blue, of Mexico blue, Gulf blue. I think Porsche has, like, for me, hands down the best blues and the best reds.
The best blues and the best red. Yeah, your car is really nice too. We'll include some the links to your Instagram so people can see ISCO in all its glory. And a lot of, if you watch Francis's videos on ISCO's page, you get to see a lot of everything. I believe it's called Calabao, right? That's your YouTube channel.
Yep.
Awesome.
Named after our car club.
Yeah, we'll plug that too. We gotta do another episode too where you talk about Calabao, and then maybe you can talk about your company and how you're growing it and your passion for cars, because that's also really inspiring too. Someone who's worked full-time job and then is also building something on the side. A lot of our viewers are trying to find fulfillment and build their own thing too. So we'll do another episode with you kind of in the future. Yeah. So
I'm down.
Yeah, so I think I'm up my 5th pick, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so me, I've always kind of got into trucks ever since I started seeing a lot of my friends drive trucks. Francis started driving a truck too, so I've always liked EVs, so I have to go with Rivian. Before the Model S, I wanted an R1T. My Model Y got destroyed, and then I looked into the R1T, kind of decided, the supercharging infrastructure isn't there yet, but the car is so nice and so fun to drive. I drove one test drive the other day. It was a great time. It was just a used one. But R1T, Rivian, I like what they're doing, especially with their self-driving. And it's good that we're having an American manufacturer coming in to kind of compete with Tesla, push each other. And I think the founder is also an MIT grad too, so he's a very technically sound guy. So, and his team, I've had a lot of colleagues at UCLA who worked at Rivian. They're so smart. And then a lot of colleagues who were from Rivian moved to Google. So I've seen that too. And I just love the quality of people, the quality of the product, and how we're trying to make the world a little bit better with some EV cars. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, that was my top 5. I appreciate you, Francis. This last question I always ask because a lot of our viewers would love to know, what is one piece of advice you would give yourself or give anyone to kind of better their career or just better their life?
Cool. That's a great question. No, I think there are so many things that I could even tell my younger self, right? But some things that we can definitely share with you all here is, number one, just be thankful for every opportunity that you get. Yep, every single thing that you get to do in life is a blessing. Feedback from the interview process is a blessing. They can just reject you via email, but feedback is a blessing. Another day on earth is a blessing. Good health is a blessing. Your family's good health is a blessing. There's just so many things, right? And not taking anything for granted will take you immensely far. Just so you all know, after college, my first paid job was I was a manager at a Pump It Up, which is a kid's birthday place. I was working 20-30 hours a week, which was crazy. I was making $17 an hour, and I thought I was like, oh my God, this is the best first job. And then from there I went into Target as a team lead. Grew into a senior team lead there to help open up a brand new store here in the Bay Area. And at that point, I was like, why am I in retail, right? But the reason was that I would get my recruiting experience and take that straight into tech. Mm-hmm. So, that was a huge blessing. But now looking back at it, that was an amazing, amazing thing that if I said, I'm above retail, or I'm, this isn't the career path, if I had closed that door, I probably wouldn't be here today. Mm-hmm. So, everything in life happens for a reason, and everything's a blessing.
That's awesome. That's beautiful. Yeah, everything happens for a reason. Everything is a blessing. Everything in life happens for you, not to you. I think we're kind of big proponents of that. And I appreciate you giving such great, solid advice to viewers. What you're telling everyone today about your experience within recruiting, giving the ins and outs of everything, and then the beautiful advice you give here at the end, it's going to help a lot of people. And I'm excited to see how it's going to pay dividends for you, your career, and the company you're building. So with that, we just appreciate you so much, Francis. And for those of you who want to reach out, Francis's links for ISCO, for Calabao, they're all in the below here on the video description. We'll probably get Francis on for another show later in the future. But thank you so much, Francis. We appreciate you, Jello fam. Like, comment, and subscribe. Follow for more. We'll be posting like crazy. And I appreciate y'all. Thank you, Francis.
Hey, anytime, Angelo. It's a pleasure. Thank you. Bye, y'all.